Moscow's war turns inward, Russia brink of chaos, as gasoline crisis hits the streets. Queues grow. Picture this. Russia, one of the world's biggest oil giants, is facing queues stretching miles, fuel stations running dry, and citizens scrambling for ration coupons. And yet, while this might feel like a far-off story, the ripple effects are already nudging British wallets. When Moscow's pumps run dry, UK drivers eventually pay the price. Drones cripple Russia's refineries. Here's what UK buyers should know. It all started with Ukraine's relentless drone campaign. One by one, Russian refineries were knocked offline. Ryazan, Volgograd, Saratov, Novokuybishevsk. By late August, up to 17% of Russia's refining capacity had been disabled. Repairs barely began before another strike landed. This wasn't just damage, it was systemic paralysis. For Russia, a country priding itself on being an energy titan, this was humiliation. But for us in the UK, the real concern isn't just Russia's pride. It's what happens when one of the world's biggest exporters suddenly can't refine enough gasoline to meet demand. When refineries go silent in Moscow, global markets shudder and UK prices shift. Soaring wholesale costs. Will UK drivers feel the burn? The numbers are brutal. Wholesale A95 petrol in Russia surged over 50% since January, hitting record highs of 82,300 rubles per ton. For ordinary Russians, it meant skyrocketing forecourt costs. For British buyers, the link is less direct, but no less dangerous. Here's why. Oil and refined fuels are traded on international benchmarks. When Russia faces shortages, other buyers compete for supplies elsewhere, driving up global wholesale prices. And those higher costs inevitably trickle down to us at UK petrol stations. Think back to 2022, when the Ukraine invasion first began. UK petrol prices surged to nearly £2 a litre. At their peak, the same mechanisms are in play now. Supply shock in one part of the world pushes everyone else into a scramble. But this isn't just about numbers. It's about the supply chain that connects Moscow's crisis to Britain's pumps, global supply squeeze and ripple effects in the UK. The energy market is like one giant circulatory system. Block a vein in Moscow, and the pressure builds in London. Even though Britain no longer depends heavily on Russian oil, we remain tied into the same global pricing system. Tankers, refineries, futures markets, they all respond to shortages anywhere. A drone strike in Russia can increase the cost of refining in Singapore, which in turn hikes prices in Europe. That's why global supply squeezes hit Britain hardest at unexpected moments. For example, a container ship bottleneck or a refinery fire halfway across the world can mean a few pence extra at the UK pump within weeks. This is the brutal reality of globalization. No one is truly insulated. But if the UK isn't importing Russian gasoline directly, why are we still paying the price? UK exposure indirect, but uncomfortable. Here's the paradox. The UK imports only a sliver of its energy directly from Russia, around 5 to 6% of our gas imports, and minimal oil. After the 2022 sanctions, that dependency dropped even further. On paper, we should be safe, but we're not, because the UK competes in the global pool of buyers, where every shortage raises the stakes. If Europe buys more fuel from the Middle East to cover Russia's shortfall, Britain has to compete harder for the same barrels. That bidding war filters into higher prices, whether we're buying petrol, diesel, or liquefied natural gas for power plants. So no, you won't see Russian petrol being pumped into your car at Tesco, but you'll absolutely feel Moscow's shortages in the price you pay at the till. And those higher prices don't just hit your car, they seep into every corner of your life. Inflation's cascade fuel, food, and everything in between. Fuel isn't just fuel. It's the cost of moving food from farms to supermarkets, the cost of fertilizers that grow the crops, the cost of heating factories that produce packaging. When petrol spikes, everything else follows. During the early stages of the Ukraine war, UK studies showed that energy prices accounted for up to 88% of the rise in food inflation. Think about that. Almost 9 out of 10 pennies of extra food cost came from energy. Fast forward to today, and the same dynamic looms. A spike in fuel costs won't just pinch drivers. It'll raise the price of bread, milk, meat, every weekly shop. Already, inflation has left British households cautious, with energy bills still higher than pre-war averages. Another surge, driven by Russia's chaos, could be the breaking point for many families. And with winter on the horizon, the timing couldn't be worse. What comes next? Winter worries and policy moves. As the UK heads into colder months, energy demand traditionally rises. Heating, electricity, and logistics strain the system. Add volatility in Russia, and the squeeze intensifies. The UK's energy price cap, reviewed by Ofgem every 6 months, acts as a shock absorber, but it doesn't erase the reality. Higher wholesale prices eventually filter into household bills and petrol stations. Families already stretched thin could face another round of hikes, despite government support schemes. At the same time, Britain is leaning more heavily on renewables. Wind and solar already supply a significant share of electricity. That's a buffer, but it doesn't erase global oil dependency, especially for transport and industry. Until alternatives scale further, crises abroad will keep landing at our pumps. So what does this all mean for British households in the months to come? Britain's reality households, hauliers, and hard choices. For drivers, the effect could be felt in pennies at the pump, but for industries, especially hauliers, farmers, and manufacturers, the impact is magnified. A small rise in diesel costs cascades through entire supply chains. Farmers pay more for tractors and fertilizers, supermarkets pay more for deliveries, and consumers pay more for goods. In short, it's not just about whether your commute costs an extra £5 a week, it's whether your groceries, heating, and everything else climb along with it. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If energy costs keep spiraling, what do British households cut back on first? History may offer a clue, and it's not comforting. Historical echoes, from the 1970s oil shock to today. Older generations may recall the 1970s oil crisis, when embargoes caused fuel shortages, soaring inflation, and long queues across the West. Britain introduced ration coupons, though they were never used, and inflation soared past 20%. The parallel today isn't exact, but the echoes are eerie. Once again, geopolitical conflict has disrupted supply. Once again, energy is at the center of inflation. And once again, households are bracing for a squeeze. The difference is that Britain is more diversified now, with renewables and liquefied natural gas replacing some of the old vulnerabilities. But global interconnection means that even when we think we're safe, disruption in Moscow still stings in Manchester. So what's the takeaway for UK buyers staring at the next bill?